Hi, I'm Chris from Airwindows, and hey,
you do this.
because this is Airwindows kCosmos. So this is another giant, humongous reverb. You might consider that it's a follow-up to Airwindows Galactic, which I've done numerous versions of. I think Galactic 3 is my best version of that so far. But I wanted to expand it outwards into the even larger space, because the idea is make something that can work for people, but also work as a kind of space ambient tool. And I'll show you what I mean by that here. This is the sound, and then we can turn on kCosmos. And the way we've got set up is as a normal reverb, by which I mean regen is on 0.5, filter is on 0.5, we've got early reflections, we're not using a pre-delay, but we can, and dry wet is about halfway across. So if I use another plugin, namely Purest Fade in front of it, to shut off the sound, the audio goes away. But now check out what happens if I turn filter and regen all the way up and we go to full wet, which is, it's not like my usual reverbs in that this one, it's dry, wet, and in between is actually 50-50 for each, because it can produce loud output sometimes. But yeah, I've now got it fully cranking. We've still got a little bit of early reflections, but we don't even need to have that. And I can use fade to put in a sound. Now what you'll notice is that's not going away. In fact, for very quiet sounds, it'll even slowly build up from nothing. The idea here is to have a ultimate space ambient reverb where you can have stuff going on and begin a sound from very faint details. Like this. I've got my fade on Purest Fade very, very, very quiet, but you can still kind of hear it's adding stuff. And then if I put it to 0 again, it'll just hang on this and probably keep creeping up in volume to a certain point. However, if I take this and throw on full volume going into this space, it will get louder. You can hear the early reflections doing this. But what's also happening is the pressure of the new audio coming in is slightly controlling the feedback on the reverb space. It's going to shoot for a moderately loud and moderately quiet level. So if you have it at very, very quietness, which we can do by shutting the regen right off again, and I will shut the early reflections off too, and we just put in the tiniest, faintest noises, what kCosmos is going to do is creep that up very slowly and gradually. If you were, for instance, playing an instrument into this, the first thing that came to mind for me was a guitar, of course, because I play a guitar. You could have your guitar live, hopefully it's not humming because that's going to become the fundamental sound, and maybe touch the string, or take a lighter or a piece of metal and rub it on the string, which was something that a guy from Gong used to do, and create a faint sound that gets added in to your ambient space. And you just put the tiniest amount in there. and it'll start evolving, and it'll also start growing as it goes. And this is a optimal situation for space ambient, whether it be nice and pretty like this. This is essentially based on the patch for Surge XT that I did that's called Moderntron. I did a kind of Mellotron-like thing, which involves a number of Surge's features. And we've got the fade thing in there. That's all I'm using to drive this, but I could feed anything into it and get this type of effect. Or you could feed less harmonious noises in and get a darker effect. And speaking of less harmonious noises, I might only have C major in this, but if we have this other control, D-Res. This is still infinite reverb without any significant degradation. We're just using D-Res to pitch it down, meaning that we can also feed back in the regular stuff at the existing pitch and then maybe pitch shift it up. And now we have this droning away forever because D-Res lets you manipulate what you're layering onto it. And then we can put a little more in. And we get this composite. And the way it works is if anything is coming in and it's too loud to fit in the mix, what it will tend to do, not in the sense of being a full-on limiter or clipper, but it will tend to push down what is already in the infinite sustain to let the new sound in. And it'll do that pretty well. And then we can go back to full res again. And we have a little of each of those things, and they're sustaining forever. Again, early reflection has another purpose, but we've also got this. Check this out. We've got an infinite sustaining thing. But filter is on 1. Filter has an extra purpose. What's in this filter is a way of taking what's in the early reflections and running a new kind of brick wall filter that I've done, which is not really that new. It's basically a normal oversampling style FIR filter, and there's nothing that special about it, although I do have a version of this coming out which has some new features to it. But that's what filter does. Except there is another detail. If you've got it on 1, not only is it rolled up as high as it can go, so that the input to the loop is unfiltered, and if it's at a lower setting, we're running that brick wall, you get a different sound. I'll show you that in a moment. But there is also the capacity for just one tiny layer of averaging on the feedback stuff. And if you take it off of 1, listen to what happens to the very highest highs. This is now an infinite sustain deep ambient filter. Deep ambient reverb. So we can have stuff with high frequencies in it, at least to some extent. But then when you stop putting in new sound, it'll recede off into the distance And if you don't want it to recede off into the distance, just peg the filter to 1 again, and it'll stop getting any darker. But as soon as it's off of full crank, you start getting that slight darkening of the deep ambience. And that's probably an equally good way of having like sustaining long duration space ambient type of stuff, because this will give you a lot in the way of space. It'll go much deeper if there's just that little bit of filtering in there. But that's not all we can do, because, and bear in mind early reflection, that's its own layer, and that's never filtered. So that might be more useful for using it as a normal reverb, but it will also give you a little more direction to what you're putting in. Like it'll highlight stuff that you're recording into there, kind of like this. Using a lot of early reflection gives you a little bit more gloss around whatever is being added, rather than having the direct stuff be just dry and then the deep reverb. If you put early reflections loud, you get a blend between dry and the deep reverb. Which might be more useful for normal style humongous ambiences rather than the infinite stuff that I'm doing now. But here is one more thing we can do. Full wet. This is what filter sounds like. So we can really brick wall filter the input coming in a way that's quite aggressive down to the frequency that it uses. That's because this is using a quick little FIR filter that I made, originally inspired by Bacon Paul's 6 sine synth, and I essentially figured out how do you do this sync interpolation brick wall filter, and I figured it out, and I'm using one here. So you can use it as a sort of filter sweep, kinda. It's not a perfectly smooth filter sweep, but I'm running it as efficiently as I can. And it's nicely close to being a full-on brick wall. And then if we pull back regeneration a little bit, we can hear it more clearly. So there's full wet, no early reflections, and what the filter sounds like directly. And of course, at full filter, we have no roll-off whatsoever, so there will be a difference between what it sounds like at full crank and what it sounds like when the highs are receding into distance. When you don't have that much regeneration, you don't hear it as clearly. And lastly, if we are using early reflections and a little bit of dry, or a goodly quantity of dry, we can dial in filter so that the deep ambience sounds more hall-like. Maybe pull back the regen even more. If we want to get ambience around the sound, maybe what we do is have the early reflections really high up and then a little pre-delay so that it sounds like our source audio is actually in front of the reverb behind it. We can pull regen down a little bit and take it closer to acting like a real hall, even though it is meant to be Cosmos. Cosmos is meant to be giant. It's meant to be your infinite space ambient machine. But it does actually work pretty well. It's a nice, deep hall-like experience. And we're not even running this all that loud. It's capable of going louder than this. Or doing this. And I'm going to leave it doing that because that sounds cool. And yeah, kCosmos is the new plugin for this week. I'm working on a whole bunch of other stuff. This has been a high intensity work period for me. So I have the compression version of Pointy Guitar coming soon. It's called Chimey Guitar. And I've been working on bringing out mono versions of a certain number of specific plugins, namely Console 9 and 2Tape 7 and 8, because somebody asked me very nicely whether they could have that in an audio unit end-to-end version so that they can use that on multi-channel mixes. So one of the things I'm going to be doing during this upcoming week is going into my website and finding every single plugin I've ever made that will run in multi-channel mixes, because there's a goodly number of those, more than you would imagine. Audio units can be coded as mono plugins, but when the audio units are coded as mono plugins, they're what's called end-to-end. You can load them up in a 7.1 mix, and they will apply to every channel the same. So you don't get to, say, single out the subs channel and do something different with it, but you do get to apply the Airwindows plugin. And again, this is not going to be for consolidated, because consolidated is based on stereo plugins. But for the audio unit users, and this should hold both for retro stuff, because it'll go all the way back to the earliest audio unit using DAWs, I make those available, and modern signed Apple Silicon stuff, you get to have massively multi-channel mixes and use Airwindows plugins in them. So I'm making the effort to make that possible for Console 9, and Console 8 was requested, but I'm also doing Console 7. 2Tape 8 was requested, but I'm also doing 2Tape 7 because some people are equally big fans of that. And that will mean that people doing multi-channel stuff at whatever level they're doing it, because the thing is, a lot of these people are like all into Dolby Atmos and stuff, and they are very privileged people with amazing studios. But what if you're just working with some kind of laptop? You've got that available. You've figured out something to invent to make it work, but you don't have that level of privilege to have the giant 7.1 mastering studio that's qualified for Dolby Atmos or whatever. Well, you should be able to also play with multi-channel stuff if that's what floats your boat. And so I will be bringing out, probably not as a weekend release, I'm going to continue doing releases for everybody. No exceptions, as I always say. But for people who are doing that multi-channel stuff, I have that update coming out, and I will also be updating the website to highlight every single plugin I make that lets you do that. And it's not going to be literally everything, but it's more than you would suspect were originally implemented in the Apple audio unit as a N2N plugin. All of those work with multi-channel. So you got something to look forward to anyhow. That's kind of what I care about. I was going to say get back to work, but the upcoming week I'm likely to derp around making music. I've been doing a lot of stuff with my synthesis and such for coming up with ways of, I can't grab that conveniently from here. I have this little wooden tray, which I stuck a piezo pickup on, and I've been working out how to drive my Eurorack stuff, electronic percussion from there, off of the wooden tray with the piezo pickup, because I'm trying to get into electronic forms of music that are human played rather than sequenced. And I don't know what's going to happen from that other than somebody is going to say my timing is bad. I can guarantee that, but that's not really the point. I could do timing perfectly anytime I want by just running the sequencers there or indeed in the DAW. And I'm trying to do something else and see what comes out of it. I'm also very likely to jump on my Minecraft server and spend some time doing it. It will depend upon how heavily it's being griefed at the moment. Who knows? It becomes a metagame of, like, can I engage with this in a way that's amusing, or do I just sort of leave it to burn? And I don't know, but we'll find out. And I will be bringing not kCosmos. That's what I call my reverbs. Chimey guitar next week, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff also in the works. All of that is, of course, supported by my Patreon. I'm really grateful for the fact that I have that right now. Some of my costs on a monthly basis are going up by hundreds of dollars a month, but I'm able to survive that, and I'm not in $1 million of credit card debt. So that's very cool. I endorse people not being in $1 million of credit card debt. And on that note, I guess, I'll talk to you later, and I'll bring you another free plugin later. But for now, enjoy kCosmos. Bye-bye.